Welcome back to episode 118 of the Block Runner podcast. This is your host, William, always here with your co-host, Iman.
Yo,
All right.
always here, eh? Except for like the last 3 or 4 months, dude. However long it's fucking been.
Yeah,
How long has it been, dude?
I almost forgot the intro, so I was thinking as I was saying.
It feels like this, dude. It feels like I'm legit starting over, dude. I'm like all nervous and shit, dude. Like what's going on, man?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a while since we've done this, dude. For many reasons,
Yeah.
but
So obviously we've been extremely busy, and the reason why we're coming together again is because we're starting to sense the crypto surge brewing again.
the
And
resurging. I
resurge,
mean, it's
yeah.
been surging for a while. I mean, we started the podcast. I mean, you have the screen open, right, of the meme line, the meme
Yep.
charts.
Yep.
Actually, those aren't meme charts. That's like the actual Bitcoin chart.
This is the stock
But
to
yeah,
flow
we
ratio. Yep.
yeah, we started during the green dipping back then, didn't we? Like that little bowl.
Yeah. Right here.
Yeah. So technically, since we started this podcast, we've been on the surge like nonstop since the
That's
start.
true.
So the surge never really stops. But like from a short term perspective, it definitely like we've been like in a lull,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of like what it felt like, at least for like an altcoin perspective. For NFTs, not really. Like NFTs seem to have like little
It's
mini bubble boom cycles, like they come and go, come and go.
yeah.
But I think it's because the market's so small for them. But from like a cryptocurrency altcoin perspective, we've been like in a lullish phase, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what's interesting is that we started the podcast, right around $3,500 Bitcoin.
Yeah,
And throughout this last, what is it, 2.5 years, almost 3 years that we've been like
yeah.
working,
Hmm.
there's been the emotions are literally ups and downs like throughout like um
Yeah,
all these like steps here. But when you look at it, like it looks like we've been in a surge this whole time.
yeah. Now that like we kind of had like we stepped away from it for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
now we get like a nice fresh perspective, like looking at this chart. It's like, yeah, dude, like things have been pretty fucking good the last couple of years, haven't they? Even
Yeah,
though
right.
like I've hit like 5 or 6 like depression cycles
Those-
during this whole up phase, like, cause
yeah.
yeah, like every single one of those little bottoms, you feel those, dude.
Yeah, that's true.
These short term lull phases, like because you're always like, I don't know. For me, I guess, because like I'm the eternal pessimist. Like every time I see a downswing, it's like, dude, it's
Yeah, it's
over.
it's over.
Like
Yeah.
it's all over, dude. Failed experiment every time.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know.
yeah, you've said that a couple of times during the podcast over the years, and
Mhm.
I mean, I just find it hard to believe like how you can think that when there's clear support like all over this thing, man.
I know, and it's even crazier because like I got in like what
Yeah,
2017,
let's zoom in here.
like June 2017, whatever the hell that was.
Yeah, right here.
Even since then, it's been nothing but going up. Like, and I
It's true.
still can't get over these emotions, dude. Freaking sucks.
Yeah, I
This is
mean,
why AI like takeover is inevitable, dude. Just to like replace these horrible,
yeah,
like, yeah, this. I don't know.
yeah, no, that's true, and yeah, those emotions are real. Like, because of those emotions, you make bad decisions, right? You sell when you shouldn't, and then you buy when you shouldn't. There's this FOMO, and the whole reason why we're sort of like kind of restarting everything and trying to organize our lives a little bit more towards capturing like what this is going to be like. We're expecting to see a level of FOMO that has been never been seen in any industry ever, and so we're expecting to see that within the next 6 months.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, we're no strangers to FOMO at this point. Like, I've lived through a lot of like ups and downs, I guess, in the last 4 or 5 years of like, I don't know, speculating in markets. So there's the 2017 obviously
mhm,
phase. We saw what FOMO felt like back then. And I never thought we'd see like an opportunity where it would surpass that level of like craziness,
mhm,
because like back then it was like you could literally couldn't go wrong in that market, right? You could throw a dart at any like ICO that was launching from roughly October to like end of November of 2017, like you would at minimum getting a 10 to 20x each
Yeah.
ICO,
Yeah.
right? So like, you couldn't fuck up unless you just, I don't know, unless you just fucked up. But I think what we're going to see in this phase two of this 2021, is it 2021 or did the bull market really start in 2020?
I would
It really started
say,
in 2020,
yeah,
right?
2020. That's COVID when it hit.
Yeah, but things didn't really pop off until the summer, like DeFi
Yes.
summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's when things started to like, it was the first glimmer of like, okay, we're starting to see semblances of the 2017 market where there was like something speculative, right?
Hmm.
There's something new. There's a new sector emerging, like a new technology, whatever, a new use case for blockchain. Everybody was like freaking out. It's like, dude, opportunities galore. Let's just start speculating. And it was like a little mini bubble there.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the year was, I don't know, what was the beginning of the year?
Well, it was
NFT, maybe?
IDO and NFTs. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
that was a big
IDOs.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
early 2021 were a bunch of IDOs and then NFTs. So if you were buying like let's say Top Shots in 2020, you're
yeah.
pretty much a millionaire, right?
Yep.
And then in 2021, if you were investing in a bunch of IDOs, I mean, I'm not sure if you'd be a millionaire, but you'd be pretty much up there.
Yeah. Or if you were speculating on, NFT art,
Oh yeah, for sure.
on platforms like Super Rare recently dropped a token. Like, and we speculated months ago that these NFT platforms, inevitably, all of them were going to like launch some token at
Yep,
some point,
that's right.
right? Just because there's just too much support to do that, like for any platform. So Super Rare did that. If you were one of those early speculators or adopters, you like the idea of NFT art, you got a handsome airdrop for that.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you got
It's
paid
like 25
if you,
grand. Like if you were
yeah,
like
dude.
deep into super rare, you got like 25 grand worth of an airdrop.
Like at minimum, we know people who got like close to 100.
Yeah,
Those are like whales, like who are buying like a ton of these art pieces.
yeah.
So that's just one crazy event that's happened over the last 6 to 8 months. And then like if you were a big believer in gaming being a big use case or event inevitable adoption technology to blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
and you were speculating with Axes like a
Oh
year
yeah.
ago, you got handsomely rewarded for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
people were breeding axes like I mean, millionaires
yeah,
right there.
we interviewed some of those guys. You can go back in time.
Yep.
Ben Kelly and his whole crew, like they
Yeah.
kind of like,
Axie
dude, they
GG.
were so far ahead of the game. Yeah, like you can kind of like label them as genius at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like they had that level of foresight to be like, yo, this has immense potential. Like we should probably develop some type of way to like breed as many of these things as possible.
You
you
know
know?
what? You know what the nugget of wisdom was, or like the kernel, or the takeaway for something like that is it was a working game. Like it had a working economy,
Yeah.
and like
It was it was it was understandable. It had that closed loop.
yes,
It
yes,
made sense,
yes.
you know?
And Ben Kelly had the foresight to be like, hey, this is a working economy. Like he had a huge history with Magic the Gathering, and like that had its own ecosystem. And then he saw Axie Infinity, and he saw that there's an economy there that had a closed loop system, and he took a huge bet and started breeding a bunch of Axies, and now I think he's like running a like a scholarship program and
Oh, a lot
making
of those early guys are now. Yeah.
yeah, just because Axies became so expensive, like $300 a pop, and it wasn't
Mhm.
sustainable for people to kind of purchase and play the game. So scholarship was a way for those whales who had a bunch of Axies to allow other players to play the game, and then they would just share the revenue, which is
Yeah.
brilliant. And they saw that before it actually occurred and took
Yeah.
advantage. Like just like the whole point of the whole crypto industry. If you go watch any crypto YouTuber, it's all about getting in early, right? That's how you make money. And
Yeah, man. So what do you think like is the common denominator? Like all these things we just kind of went through, like of breakthrough innovations, I guess. Like like at the time when we're discussing them, they're largely undiscovered or unappreciated. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
like super fringy things. That's why like we find them interesting and like we try to like understand them.
Mm-hmm.
But the market as a whole really hasn't like either understood or they just don't give a fuck yet, or like the proper marketing hasn't been deployed for them to even like be exposed to it. Like, what is the common denominator? Like,
That's
I
such a
guess
good
that,
question because
yeah.
I think the underlying sentiment of what you're asking is essentially is like when you find a good project. Let's just throw out there the one that we've talked about pretty often is the graph. When you find a good project, you understand like its necessity in the crypto space. You know that it's an important piece of the technology, foundational piece, and you know you decide to make some sort of investment, whether it's $100 or $10,000, doesn't really matter, but you make that investment, and well, your underlying question is how can you determine whether something is going to actually blow up, you know, at some point in the future? And then do you
Mm-hmm.
have the wherewithal to hold on to it like diamond hands as it, you know, explodes if it does, right? And it's tough. I mean, because we interviewed Ben Kelly and he was deep
Yeah.
into Axie and we were not. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, it's not easy to recognize these things when they're happening in real time. Like just like the
Yeah.
graph. Most people don't really understand what the graph is. I understand why they don't understand. It's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But I figured if we hold on to the graph long enough, it's gonna pay off. It won't. It may not pay off this cycle, but it might next cycle. But yeah, it's tough. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, and
Yeah.
you need to have the resources to do this too, right? To be able to buy something kind of like 4 years in advance when it's the cheapest, and then hold on to it for like 4 years, and then you do like a
Yeah, you
thousand
really
x.
do have to have like a also like a super broad and like a very well like umbrella over like the whole scene. Like I think from my perspective, I was gonna ask a follow-up question. Like, can you think of a time where we identified like a first mover in like any respect and
Hmm.
like it ended up failing?
Hmm.
Because we've been in this space for a while now. So we've seen a bunch of first movers, I think, like you know, like Compound. Remember, like when we first
Yeah.
started, we were first identifying like these DeFi players, like Compound. You do like we found Compound before any DeFi protocol had a token. You know, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and obviously, like Compounds was one of the first protocols to launch a token. It kind of like sparked up the whole DeFi craze. Like all
Yeah.
of a sudden,
It's
everybody was
true.
spinning up DeFi protocols with tokens behind them. You know,
Yeah.
so can you think of one that like
That
somebody
that failed.
had a first mover advantage and it just didn't pan out? You
Yeah,
know?
I don't think there is one. I mean,
Yeah.
would you
So
consider Compound like? I mean, even though they're first, I mean, I think they're one of the bigger DeFi products out there. So I wouldn't
for
consider.
lending, I would think so. I mean, Aave probably is bigger potentially, but
Yeah,
regardless, like I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out like what it is that like makes things like truly
yeah,
valuable, you know?
yeah,
And yeah, that's not to say that's the only like actors in this space that like, you know, has like monumental success, because we also know another trend. Whenever something like a
yeah.
first mover
I was gonna
gains
say
adoption, there's copycats, and they usually
exactly,
have success as well. You know.
exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say because anytime that there's a first mover, so what tends to be successful are the first movers in general, right? And then the next phase of that are the copycats on other blockchains, and then those
Oh yeah,
explode. They do thousand x easy.
yeah. That's like a whole other layer, actually. Yeah. Now I think what you just said is like this is going to fuel the 2.0 phase of this current bull cycle. Is like
Hmm.
now we're starting to see these new chains activate and like
Cardano,
they're flourishing ecosystems now. Like
yeah,
they don't just have copycats anymore. Some of them have like unique innovations in their own right. Like Solana,
yeah,
from what I've
Solana,
seen, like
yeah,
Solana's blowing up. Like there's like a lot of different projects emerging from it for whatever reason. We haven't done enough investigation, I don't think.
yeah, yeah. But that's
Pretty
interesting
soon,
though.
Polkadot, I think, is going to go through that same phase.
Yeah, Polkadot's doing their parachain offering pretty soon.
Exactly. So that means Kusama must have like they're pretty mature at this point, I would think.
Yeah.
Damn. I don't know. It's been like a couple months since we like legitimately looked into Kusama and Polkadot.
Yeah,
But when we left off, like they were in the middle of their offerings, right? The
yeah,
parachain offerings.
yeah,
So yeah, I guess this podcast here we're having now is like this is our restart moment.
yeah. It's like a
You know what I
reset,
mean?
reset, kind of like get some perspective on everything that's happened. And just take a like a step back and see and predict what's going to happen next, because as you can see here, if I zoom in, we're starting to test the resistance point here.
Yeah.
And what we
Mm,
will see is it's going to test for maybe a couple of weeks, because the time is running out, right? We're like nearing the end of this, and
yeah.
there is speculation that this bull cycle is going to extend a little bit. And the reason why people are expecting that is because as Bitcoin increases in value, because of the halvening, there's less supply, and therefore it reaches some degree of asymptote for a price, and therefore the volatility starts to shrink ever slightly as time goes on. And
Mm,
so, and then as it shrinks, but the length between these cycles start to extend. And just because the effect of the halvening becomes less and less every single 4 years. So
mm,
so then you would expect the cycles to extend ever so slightly every cycle. And so for the previous 4 cycles, if I go press home here, it's easy to measure. These happen every 4 years, right? So between here and here is 4 years, here's 4 years, and then here between this peak and the theoretical peak is going to be a little bit longer than 4 years. So, so that's the expectation. I mean, it could, blow up in December and just kind of tank, but I think a lot of smart people are expecting the peak to happen after December. So, so yeah, I mean, that's sort of like trying to get some perspective as to what's gonna happen, and make some predictions, because I do think we're gonna see somewhere around $200,000 Bitcoin after this December.
yeah. Yeah, with that, so what does that mean? I mean, we've had these discussions a lot in the past, like, because asking for a six-figure Bitcoin is asking
Mm,
for like, there's a lot of macro implications to that, I think,
yeah,
because like you're asking for like a lot of capital injection into this ecosystem. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, it's no longer just us like internet degens anymore. Like to get into the tens of trillions for like a market cap perspective, like you're asking for governments to participate, big corporations to participate. That's a lot of capital,
That's
dude.
true.
Like,
That's true. So, and then another thing, another kind of perspective setting, conversation is gold is worth 12 trillion right now. Is that correct, or is it 9 trillion? I think it's
this might
between.
be, this might be worthy of a Google.
I think it's between 9 and 12
You're in the
trillion.
ballpark, dude, for sure.
Market cap of gold. Okay, it is 11 trillion. Okay,
Okay, pretty
so
close. Yeah.
11 trillion. So a 10x from here is essentially a $10 trillion Bitcoin market cap. So
And
10,
what that means is like another 10 or so trillion for the rest of the market. So you're asking like, or you're projecting a 20 plus trillion like crypto market, you know?
yeah, and the reason why we're bringing this up is because I do recommend you guys to listen to the interview between Pomp and Plan B, right? The guy who really outlined the Bitcoin stock to flow ratio, and
Mm-hmm.
and Plan B was talking about how he is wouldn't be surprised if we saw $400,000 Bitcoin. So somewhere around this range here, right? This is around 400,000 where the mouse is.
See, that would be like yeah, because
So four hundred
that,
thousand means like an 8 to almost $10 trillion Bitcoin.
yeah. So we're
So
we're talking like Bitcoin neck and neck with gold,
yes,
essentially neck and neck.
yes,
A a multi-thousand-year-old asset that like many nations and empires have like risen and fallen on the back of,
and fought
and
for
within, huh?
and battled for.
yeah, battled and like, just imagine the amount of death that's occurred like for the claiming of this asset,
Yeah.
gold from a historical perspective. And this fucking thing invented 12, 13 years ago is going to be right there with it. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy to
But
think
you know
about.
what?
Like,
It's the effect of digitizing an asset, right? Just because there's what 4 billion cell phones all
yep.
accessing the internet, and
Yeah.
and all of a sudden there's an invention of a digital gold that is significantly better than the analog version of gold, and then you have the digital gold competing in 10 years with the analog version that's 1,000 years old, right? From a
Mhm.
from a human perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so
So do
now,
you think it's safe? I'm just gonna throw this idea out there just because this is the way my brain likes to like travel.
yeah,
Like, considering what I just said about the history of gold, like, do you think at some point, like, the superpowers of the world will feel just as like evil and like conquering? Like, once they recognize Bitcoin as valuable as gold, it's like, all right, now it's time to start killing some people for this resource.
damn,
Do
that's
you think
interesting.
great wars will begin? And what does that even mean? Like, how do you claim a larger share of Bitcoin from like a conquering perspective? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, does that mean you need to like,
there's a couple of things playing into the response to that question is if you take the trajectory of gold and like thousands of years of history and like with between that time there's plenty of time to strategize and like have a better army than your enemy who has gold, right? And there's a time and a lot of time and strategy goes into trying to take that asset. But like you were saying, Bitcoin was invented roughly 10 years ago, and 10 years is not enough time for like countries to like level up and understand what this asset is. And even if they did understand, it's not like you can go to war for this, because as soon as the password to the private key dies, Bitcoin, they're gone forever.
yeah.
So I think I don't think you're gonna see a war for this. Not like we saw
Yeah,
wars
there's a
for
lot of
gold.
other good reasons to go to war about. This might be like a reason to like down the line once all the other wars occur. I don't
Hmm.
know, maybe potentially like we're maybe like in the realms of like Bitcoin's
You know
no
what?
longer pegged to the value of the dollar. It's just now it's just Bitcoins, right? Now it's just,
You know what? I don't. We're thinking at too analog, because when you say war, it's like bombs, weapons, tanks.
yeah.
But
Well,
there's a
that's the climate. We still live in that time, dude, whether
true,
you like
but
it or
but
not,
but you know what? There's a war going on right now, and it's a digital war. We
Mhm.
got hackers, as armies,
Mhm.
right? They're the infantrymen are the hackers now. And so if a country was motivated to go and hack another country to get access to their Bitcoin, it's very possible. We see it all the time with exchanges, right?
Wow.
And these are
Yeah,
not,
see that I could see that. I could see like a significant amount of like resource allocation to like it's a new branch of military. It's just like the hacker,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. Yeah. The
Well, then we
digital
got Navy,
infiltrator.
Army, Air Force. Now we got Space Force. We'll call this the digital force or
Yes,
something,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
not?
yeah. Yeah, man, like Ready Player One, like army.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's a war that's happening right now. It's like an invisible war, and
Yeah.
we see it. We don't really recognize it as well as like just as equally as countries didn't recognize the value of Bitcoin. We're not seeing that there's a war going on, and
Mm.
I mean we can go back to the lady who blew the whistle on Facebook. I mean, she basically said that Facebook was knowledgeable about the damages that it was causing to humanity, and they still chose to essentially generate more revenue.
What damages specifically? Like mentally or what?
Mentally, yeah.
Like mental
Yeah,
damages?
because
What
from
do you
a
mean? Like they did like a internal research of
mhm.
this or
Oh
what?
yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, just from a basic standpoint, like using Instagram negatively affects the people that use it, like from a sentiment standpoint, from a mental health standpoint. Just because, I mean, if you go on Instagram, in general, you see everybody living their best life, and like it's just a bunch of it's everyone living their best life and a bunch of fake news.
Yep.
So it clouds it muddles
Distorts reality.
distorts
Yeah.
reality exactly. So and then the whistleblower also read a bunch of reports from Facebook where they could have made the choice to have like a healthier mental society, but they ended up choosing to generate more revenue. But I don't want to say that they're the people at Facebook like Zuckerberg are necessarily bad people. It's not as if they're sitting around and talking about how to destroy the planet. I think what's happening is you hire a bunch of developers and say, hey developers, can you develop something that generates more revenue? And they're like, okay, let's do that. And they build these algorithms that generate more revenue. The side effect is mental health damage. And so now the humans within Facebook, they're like, oh shit, there's a mental health issue with our platform. Let's figure out what we need to do. Let's hire some people. Let's do some tests. And it's like, okay, let's implement some standard where we increase mental health. But the algorithm is programmed to generate more money. And so now there's a difference between what the algorithm is doing and what the humans want to happen. And so in other words, the people at Facebook are trying to do the good thing, trying to do the right thing, but the coders, they're being told to generate more revenue. And that's it. Like I think
And when you
it's
mean revenue, you mean like retention essentially, because that's where they extract revenue from, right? Like
yeah, it's like
eyeballs and like making
exactly.
sure those eyeballs never leave.
Yeah. And not only that,
Right.
those eyeballs share that information. And what's typically shared, like sexual content, violence, shock content, that's literally what's shared. And so then you propagate like, fake
Memes.
news, memes, things like that. And, and so many people are talking about it now, like John Oliver. John Oliver had a segment called Misinformation. And they're talking about how most languages other than English, they propagate fake news more predominantly than the English language. And it's because many of the products come from the Western world and they're just focused on the English language. So they implement some stopgaps to not share fake news. But in other
Mm-hmm.
languages, there are no gates. There's no throttles. There's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and everybody seems to be talking about it now. And personally, I felt it. Like a lot of my family, they share a bunch of Spanish content, and all that Spanish content is fake news, and they think that it's real, and it's just simply it is not.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not their fault. They get inundated with this stuff.
So
So
what's the so we've had evidence or precedent of like whistleblowers coming out in the past and like pretty much nothing changing as a result
yeah,
of such whistleblow. But I'm just curious, like what's the
like Snowden.
proposal of like what needs to change in order to
Well,
like improve our mental health? From my perspective, like remember when Facebook went down for like 8 hours or something
yeah,
like that, and
yeah.
like yeah, that's probably the solution. Just nuke it all. I think like
It
all the
it isn't.
memes
It
were like
isn't a
all these
bad
Zoomers like
solution.
freaking out and panicking, like, oh my God, like, what are we gonna do? Everyone's just stuck with Twitter,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Now imagine if the same thing happened to Twitter and then TikTok and
yeah.
of course, and then all of a sudden, give our youth maybe like a few months to like recover from such trauma,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
eventually we'll reacclimate to reality again.
yeah.
So clearly, that's not the trajectory we're heading towards. We're not moving towards reality. We're moving
But
further and
think
further and
about
further away from that.
no,
You
I
know.
agree. And a full reset isn't a bad idea, and it's because there's a kind of a differences of incentives, right? Humans generally want other humans to be healthy, right? In general. But the incentives, like the capitalistic incentives, is to generate more money. Number go up is good, right? That's the incentive. And so when you're asking developers to generate more money, right, and create algorithms that make money, it goes against mental health. So a great reset would be helpful only because the you kind of eliminate the incentive mechanisms that push the negativity, right? That push the fact that making more money means the cost is bad mental health.
Mm.
So yeah, it isn't easy. I don't think unless the incentives change, and this is her words, unless the incentives change for Facebook, where when you make more money is when people are generally mentally more healthier, right? Once that incentive is in place, there won't be a change in Facebook.
Mm. So that basically means like somehow I just don't understand how you achieve that.
You
Like
can't. You
you're
can't.
only allowed like one flex post per month or something. Like it's like you're mandated like one post with like some you cannot showcase an asset above like $10,000 on your profile. Like
No, I would
you
I
know,
would go that feels a little bit more dystopic, but I think of it
yeah,
this way. Think of it this way.
exactly.
It's like maybe content that is more positive is content that is shared more often by the algorithm.
Mm. But then who's the judge of like positivity? You know what I mean? Like now
Yeah,
you're asking Facebook to judge
for
morality.
sure,
You
for
know, like
sure.
that's too hard to do.
No, I totally agree. And there's like a human component to this where we see like shock content and we want to share it. Like
Mm.
we're sort of like wired for that. Like remember the gladiator like age where entertainment was humans killing each other.
I mean, we're still there, dude. I love a good boxing and MMA
Yeah.
match, dude. Like that's my favorite thing.
I mean
Like I
ultimately
will,
that's what sports are, right? Humans going
yeah,
against each other and the end result isn't death, but there's wins and losses, right? It's almost
yeah,
the same thing.
pretty much. It fulfills that same trigger zone in
Yeah.
your brain.
That's right.
Like watching humans like basically kill each other. In combat, right? It fulfills whatever I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
Was
exactly.
like
Some
the
human
innate
component.
like desire to battle within us, you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's tricky. I mean, that's the origin word of fan, right? Is fanatic, right? People they get obsessed with sports, right? And I think it comes from like multiple generations of being entertained by death.
Mm. Yeah, man, this is an interesting topic just because for the nature of like the sector that we're involved in, the whole
Yeah.
the metaverse space, right? Like the metaverse is like the extreme version of what we're currently debating.
Well, before we even get there, these peaks here, the like all this ups and downs, like this roller coaster ride, is because of that human component, that fear factor, right? That FOMO, fear of missing
Mhm.
out. And because of fear of missing out, you have like these huge peaks that go beyond like what the model projects. And I think it comes from like a similar croc section of the brain, like the primitive section of the brain, is people don't necessarily they don't want to miss out. And when you see a $10,000 Bitcoin in 2017, I was like, oh, we're on our way to 100K. And then
Yep.
the smart people say, oh, well, now it's time to pull the rug, and then it just
Yeah.
dumps for 2 years, right? And so
Yeah,
we're
because
and
they've
the
been in for the whole ride,
exactly,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then what we're gonna see is once we reach 100,000, it's gonna reach 200,000, and then when it reaches 200,000, it could reach all the way to 400,000 or 500,000. And then the smart
Yeah.
people who understand these charts, they're gonna be like, okay, this is it. And then we're gonna pull the rug, and then for 2 years it's gonna straight dump, but it dumps to like 80 grand or 70 grand, something significantly higher where most people on the planet can no longer afford a single Bitcoin anymore.
Hmm.
And then it's reached its escape velocity. Now it's like a rich man's game. How many Bitcoins do you have? And you gotta have you gotta have a lot of money to have Bitcoin now.
Yeah. So I think this narrative, this whole Bitcoin trajectory, like if it follows through this cycle, like I think I said this like when we first started the podcast, like if it does it again, then no, like that's it, dude. Like
Yeah.
four in a row. You would be stupid to bet against like this cycle, this like rhythmic curve or whatever
Yep.
you want to call it. It's like it's so predictable at this point. why would you bet against that now? There's just too much evidence after this, the proof of this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, from my perspective, the Bitcoin narrative just doesn't become interesting anymore. To
Yeah.
be honest, just because it's like, come on, man, like how many times can this happen and we still fucking
But
fuck
you
up
know
and like
what?
not get on that train? You know
See,
what I mean?
that's interesting you
Like,
say that because of the fact that it's so predictable, I think that's why it's so interesting.
okay, yeah, not interesting is the wrong way to put it. It's just like what I'm really interested in is like when like I'm more interested in like the decoupling moment for like
Oh,
the
sure.
blockchain space as a whole. Like, okay, Bitcoin, no, we all should be in agreement. Like, this is what Bitcoin does,
Mm,
right? Hopefully, or at least like you said, the smart people will understand that. But there's so much happening in the space. Like, do we really have to continually rely on Bitcoin's like rhythm in order for the rest of the sector to like operate and like,
yeah.
progress? I really hope not. I'm hoping we get to a point where like the internet is like a vast ecosystem. There's so much space to like progress. It's not contingent on
Sure,
you
sure.
know one singular actor within it, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think gold has been a good model of decoupling from like the wider financial system out there
A good model of decoupling, like as a hedge
as a
asset. Yeah, I
hedge?
think
Yeah.
so. I think historically it's been a pretty decent hedge for, you know, traditional finance, but I mean it still has its ups and downs with it. But
So to a
uh,
certain degree, I mean, it is kind of correlated with like these huge swings. Like when COVID hit, gold took a hit too. I wasn't like a significant hit compared to like the equities market,
yeah,
but uh, but
I do
if
know like whenever like the actual financial collapse happened, like post 2008,
mm-hmm,
that's when gold like really found its stride. You know, like gold just kind of like went on a freaking heater, and it really
interesting,
proved its use case of like it's a hedge against financial uncertainty. Like I don't think these traditional financiers really knew like when the market would recover. I think it was like during the early stages of the whole quantitative easing era.
sure,
So
sure,
like nobody really knew the ramifications of that, how long it was going to last,
yeah,
what was going to actually happen because of this.
yeah,
And while all that uncertainty was happening, gold was going up. I
yeah.
mean, so is the rest of the market because of quantitative easing, but I don't know. I think gold definitely serves like it's a good hedge. It's like
Well,
well understood,
the
you
reason why I
know.
ask is because if Bitcoin is a better gold, then at some point there's going to be a clear decoupling moment, like you're saying. And the
Mm,
next time that the markets take a huge hit, Bitcoin, of course, is going to go down, but it won't go down to the same degree that we've seen Bitcoin go down, right? We've seen Bitcoin drop, 80, 90% in like these huge bear swings. And
yeah.
at some point, it won't go down that much only because of the halving, right? Each time it halves, the supply of new Bitcoin that enters into the economy keeps going down, and if it keeps going down, the effects of the halving start to go down too. And so now you have a Bitcoin price that stabilizes at some number that could be, in the millions. And then the real question that I have is more like once Bitcoin reaches, $1 million per Bitcoin, then FOMO probably at that point would be probably even more than what we're going to see in the next 6 months, right? If you can imagine that. Because now the whole planet is on alert, right? Right now, a lot of the planet is on alert, but not the whole planet.
Yeah.
And so once we get to $1 million Bitcoin, and then we start talking about world reserve currency, then there would be no dollar value to Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now Bitcoin, it's like, maybe, at some point in the future, kids, going to, the grocery store with their parents, they're gonna be like, they're gonna want some toy that costs like 10 Satoshis.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's gonna be like, yeah, there's gonna be a
And I'm not saying that you're gonna
drop. There's gonna
use.
be a drop down with like all the different currencies,
That's
right?
what I
Like
mean. That's what I mean. I'm not saying that you're going to use a Satoshi to buy your groceries. What I'm saying is
I
it's
see,
going to
I see, I
be
see.
10
Yeah.
Satoshi worth of a toy.
I gotcha. So yeah. Like the value of things becomes weighted in like satoshis.
Yeah.
God damn, dude.
It's
I
like,
mean, yeah, like that's what needs to occur in order for we're talking Bitcoin in the millions. Like we're talking the overriding of the value of the dollar,
yes, that's
like from
right.
a macro perspective, because it's going to require global participation from
Yeah.
like governments, just like it takes global participation for governments to recognize the dollar as like, the reserve currency. Everything's pegged to the value of it mostly, you know.
From the sounds of that, I mean, global participation means like a degree of collaboration amongst all countries, which I don't think is necessary. I think like El Salvador, they're going to start associating the value of things based on how many satoshis it is, and they're just going
Yeah.
to inherently do it themselves, just because it is a better financial model for their financial system, which was on decline significantly. And I think countries are going to start recognizing Bitcoin as legal tender, just like El Salvador, and they're just going to start valuing their products in satoshis, and then it's going to be a natural transition, like kind of like when we measure distances in miles, and other people measure, and other countries measure it in kilometers. Like I think we're going to have that financial transition as well.
I don't think it's going to be as pretty as you make it sound though. Because I still firmly believe like there are actors within the universe who have a lot to lose in that scenario, right? Where all of a sudden everyone's just like, okay, yeah, let's use satoshis, like.
but hold
So
on.
there's going to be some effort in place to kind of like prevent that from happening. Whether that's like, okay, maybe not Venezuela, okay, let's think of another country who
Brazil,
has a lot more like trade ties to the United States.
Europe,
you know, uh,
like
okay,
France,
Canada, you
Canada.
got like this Bitcoin shit. Like, well, if you want to adopt Satoshi instead of the dollar in your economy, then we're not going to trade with you anymore. We're going to impose these massive tariffs or whatever on your
See,
economy
but that's
if you're going to
weird.
do such a fucked up thing,
It's like, hey, Iman, I'm gonna sell you this T-shirt, and it's gonna cost 10 Cardanos. Like, and if you really want it,
10 card down. God, I hope not, dude. But
it,
okay.
but if you really want it, you're gonna go and exchange your bitcoins for Cardano, and then you're gonna
Yeah.
purchase that shirt in Cardano. Like that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think, I mean, that's how I see that scenario rolling out. Like if a country expects payment in Bitcoin, like countries are going to do business in Bitcoin. Like that's the end of it.
Damn, dude. See, this is why I think this what makes our dynamic so good because like we are in such disagreement about this. It's like not even close, dude.
Yeah, I guess
You
you
know,
could
like such a yeah.
consider my view more optimistic, but the
Yeah.
reason why I'm optimistic is it's not because I'm just optimistic. It is because it makes no sense to do otherwise. Like in any way. Like if you're extremely rich and you have like a bunch of fiat currency, right? All your assets are measured in fiat. But you see this new asset, and you look at this chart. It's like, oh, look, since its inception, it just goes up. Why would you continue holding fiat assets at this point anymore after 10 years? Why would you do that?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're as smart as they think they are, they should see this and be like, okay, I'm going to hedge. I'm going to take 20% of my fiat assets and put it into Bitcoin and forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the transition would be a lot more peaceful than I think you're expecting it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think I have a. Did you like history when you were going through
I
school?
didn't.
just
I
what?
didn't.
Huh?
I
You
did not.
didn't?
I didn't. And but I appreciate it now.
Yeah, I loved history growing up, and I so much to the point where like like for entertainment, like I would you know watch if I were to pick a movie or like a TV series, it's got to be has some kind of like historical reality to it
Yeah, Band of
just because
Brothers.
I like to understand like what happened previously.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's usually a lot of not good things. Like for like
yeah,
the movies and the stories they write about humanity in the past, it's largely like destructive and like very contentious,
sure,
and
sure.
like there's a very small uh fraction of like what you're calling collaboration, like that largely doesn't happen. It's usually like very
Sure.
minimal compromise, a lot of resistance, and it's like butting of heads,
Yeah.
you know. And then I observe how we are today and like how the nations kind of like look at each other, like the battle stances they have. Like literally, we have fucking like navies like bordering each other just to keep
Yeah.
each other in line.
Yeah.
It doesn't look any prettier, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But
that's
but
that's where my perspective comes in, you know, like
but
fuck.
you know what? World War III, if it happens, I think it's going to be more digital than it is physical. Because now we're talking about assets like we're saying could be worth $100 trillion within this decade. One asset could be worth $100 trillion. $100 trillion, you're competing with the world's, um, I guess, land. Right, the value of land is closer to $100 trillion. Right, um,
Something like that, yeah.
so if you have a digital asset that is competing with the value of land, then the wars are not going to be fought with missiles. They're going to be fought with like digital missiles, I guess, like hackers.
That might be like a good catalyst to start like a physical response potentially, you know. Like because I mean if a superpower has like all this invested resource into like controlling whatever domain it is they exist in, traditionally it's like resources, right? Geopolitics is like a big battle for resources and like economic control,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's
But
basically what it is. And like everything else outside of that is just like to make sure like the population like stays relatively civil so that they don't overthrow the people who are like just making sure we don't lose anything,
yeah,
you know?
but I think there's a logical reason why wars have been done physically because of the lack of technology. Just 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But think about this: when you have the real estate market at $100 trillion, right? It's physical. You can physically go there and see that land, right? Houses, buildings, $100 trillion. But when you're looking at a digital asset that's $100 trillion, there isn't a place to go and see Bitcoin, right? So there's no reason to send a missile anywhere because even if you did, like it's not
Yeah.
as if you've destroyed $100 trillion asset, right? Just by sending a missile to China, where most of the mining is happening, right? $100 trillion worth of Bitcoin still exists anyway.
Yeah.
And so
I don't know,
so
dude.
the
Dude, we're
physical part,
definitely speculating hard right now, like on the
yeah, yeah,
future wars and stuff like
future
that. But
wars.
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, I guess all this to say is, I
I
think
hope
that
you're right. You know, I really do. I hope you're right. Hopefully, this is like the most peaceful of transitions from like like this monetary financial system that we've been operating on for however for millennia,
yeah,
you know, like all of a sudden like we come to an agreement as a culture, as a species. You're like, you know what, guys, it's time to digitize everything.
yeah,
Those of you guys who like exploited the physical realm like so well in the past, and like because of that you are in like positions of supreme power that you're in today,
yeah.
you know, for the greater good of humanity, put that power aside for the rest of us. You know what I mean? And like, let's do this peacefully, lads. Like, hopefully that's what happens. But
Yeah,
shit.
I see. That sounds more like a utopia to me. I think I think a good example of what I think is going to happen is there's going to be like an enlightening moment where people realize that fiat is going to collapse by itself by design.
Mm,
And if so, if there's an equal understanding of how that works or how fiat works, then it's like, okay, it collapses, then what? What do we do next? Well, we already have a working asset that hasn't been compromised. It's been running for 10 plus years without fail, and there is no way to print more of it. So I think there's just going to be like a transition to it without any like resistance, just because the current infrastructure is going to collapse. But I mean, we're definitely getting ahead of ourselves. But the reason why we're talking about this is because We're
You know
gonna
what?
see.
And you know what? To support just what you're saying is like there actually hasn't been a major conflict among like serious superpowers in a while. Like I'm talking about, United States, China, Russia, nowadays like India, uh, the UK,
Well, North Korea was, I mean, ready to launch some nukes, even though, I mean, not nukes, but
yeah,
missiles, but they failed.
it was that they were ready, but it never happened. Like, but what I'm saying is maybe there's enough understanding among like the super mega elites who actually really are running the show. Like, even though this Bitcoin thing is like obviously the next play, like maybe we should like do this
Well,
ethically. So because the ramifications of whatever catalyst out there exists, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever, that causes like existing superpowers to want to compete against one another from a military perspective, like that could be like society ending type
sure.
event.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think they understand that, like these superpowers.
yeah, these superpowers, all superpowers have access to nukes, right? Just to give you an
Pretty much.
example.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's a mutually assured destruction. If one nuke gets launched, the whole planet is done, right? Just
Over.
because you're not just going to receive the nuke hit and then just not do anything about it, right? You're going to send your own nuke.
Yep.
So there's a mutually assured destruction, and that it doesn't help anybody. Like that's bad all the way, right, across the board.
Yeah.
So if Bitcoin is the nuke that no countries can do anything about, then you just have to adapt to it.
Mhm.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'm just trying to inject some hopium into this discussion. So like, yeah, like things really don't go south.
And going back to the interview with Pomp and Plan B, I recommend it because Plan B says a couple of things that are very interesting. So he says that this stock to flow cross asset model is going to work for the next 2 cycles, meaning we have one more happening in 2025, I believe. Is it 2025? Yeah, something like that. And then another happening in 2029. So those 2 cycles fit in line with the stock to flow ratio. What happens after that second cycle reaches the $100 trillion valuation, which is real estate. And then beyond real estate, there's going to be another halvening, right, for Bitcoin, right? After the $100 trillion valuation, there's going to be another halvening, and then 4 years later, another halvening. And the reason why this is important is because the stock to flow ratio between now and let's say 2 halvenings from now is you can interpolate what the price of Bitcoin is going to be. After it reaches the valuation of real estate, which is $100 trillion, there's no more interpolation because there's nothing worth more than $100 trillion that is tangible assets.
Mm.
And so now imagine this opportunity that we have, this once in a humanity opportunity,
Yeah.
that there is the Bitcoin that we hold in our wallets is going to be more valuable than the land on Earth, than real estate. Like to me, that is so profoundly significant that it's hard to like grasp. It's like trying to imagine how big the universe is. It's like it's on the same equivalence.
Yeah. Yeah. This is adding more reasoning behind Satoshi's like an anonymity.
Yeah.
You know, if these things come to be, is like God, dude, good thing Satoshi. Nobody knows who that guy is because I guarantee just
Yeah.
and that going for all you guys who publicly just are known to hold harbor large amounts of these assets, like I don't know, hopefully you're investing in like top of the line security,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
they're you know if these assets become that valuable, like they're going to be people, we don't know the lengths people will go to like take.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
God damn
It's
it, why do
just
I always go so negative with everything, dude? What the
well, I mean,
now,
I guess.
now I'm speculating like, dude, you better watch out, you're about to get robbed, basically is what I'm saying.
Well, I think social media has that tendency to show us like predominantly the negative side of things because that's what's the mind likes to share for some reason. But what
Mm-hmm.
I think is the most interesting thing about all of this is that 10 years We're gonna see 2 more cycles. And 10 years, that's not that long. Like we're gonna see this shit happen front stage, I man.
Yeah.
There isn't gonna
Mhm.
be another our kids, our future kids, they're gonna be like, dude, you were around when Bitcoin was $3,000, $50,000, 100,000. Like you were around at that time. Like it's gonna be a significant, portion of humanity, what we're going through
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with you, dude. Like as far as like the butterfly feelings I have, like being able, like you said, have those front row seats. Cause yeah, I always like was bummed out at the
For the internet, yeah.
yeah, missing out on the .com boom and stuff like that. I just wasn't born at the right time. But luckily we captured this one
Yeah.
at the perfect time in the perfect cycle of our own lives.
Yep.
It
That's
doesn't really
true.
matter how old you are. It's like as long as you're paying attention, like you're doing good,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just another segue into like a topic of like just it's not just for the pure historical uh significance of what's happening, but it's also like from your own like personal like wealth,
Hmm. Yeah.
like there's so much opportunity in this space, like it's
Yeah. This is the biggest wealth transfer humanity will ever see, I think.
not just transfer but wealth creator too,
Yeah. That's a good
like
point.
just like there's so much opportunity to create new wealth like that didn't exist. We're not just taking wealth from like
It's
existing
true. That's true.
sources. We're creating whole new sources of wealth creation that like you probably couldn't even think about like
That's a
10,
good
20
point.
years ago,
That's a good point. We keep talking about how fiat is self defeating because you can print infinite amount. If you think about it, if you look at the crypto market, people are printing infinite amount of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you could just plug in one little smart contract, you could just mint your own currency
Yeah.
at will,
Yeah. And
you
then all you
know.
got to do is create value out of it, and then people perceive value, and then there you go. You got a chart just like this.
Exactly. As long as you could paint a good story behind like why people should, purchase and own and,
Yeah. Use.
transact and
Yeah.
trade and whatever the hell with this currency, like you got it made, dude. And that's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed.
Yeah, man. I like to think about these things because a lot of times, throughout our lives, we lose perspective. We fail to recognize what's in front of us just because we got life, right? We got bills to pay, we got like these troubles and all these things that are happening within our lives. But sometimes it's really good to take a step back and see what is actually happening. What does it mean? Like, what does all this mean? And then understand what to expect from all of this. We don't have time to talk about it, but I guess one of our next topics was really to get into the metaverse because that has equal implications as the financial like system transitioning to cryptocurrencies does. Because now you're not only creating money, right, with cryptocurrencies that are, competing with the fiat standard, but now you're creating worlds and you're creating countries, like digital countries,
you're
with
creating
metaverses.
you're creating identity,
Identity, yes.
like there's nothing more precious than one's identity.
Yeah.
You called it like a soul.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That is what your soul is, your identity, like what makes you you.
That's
And like
right.
yeah, we're starting to digitize that, like what the fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you get any bigger than that? You don't. So yeah, and we're in the pre-infancy stages of that,
Oh
so
yeah. I think we're gonna have metaverses that have essentially GDPs that compete with countries.
I think so too.
Like imagine that, dude. Like you log in and then you're like in a digital country where the economy there is bigger than many of the countries, real countries that exist on Earth.
Hmm.
And in a lot of cases, we have that right now, right? Facebook, right? They're generating billions of dollars. Apple's worth $2 trillion. Obviously, those GDPs are competing with a lot of the countries out there. So just
Yep.
take these companies, make them into metaverses, and all of a sudden, you got a digital world competing with countries.
100%. Yeah, that's foundation. That's ground shaking stuff right there. So
Yeah,
yeah, that is going to be like our main topic of focus. Obviously, probably for the rest of our lives, most likely. based on like our current like endeavors, I don't think we're going to be able to separate ourselves from it. And based off our predictions, I don't think anybody will at some point. Like,
Yeah,
we're all going to be in there eventually because it's going to be to all of our advantage to do so. You know,
for
there's going to
sure.
be, if we're claiming the world of opportunity existing today, like the world of opportunity 20 years from now is going to trump what we're seeing right now.
Hell yeah, dude. I totally agree. Well,
So
having said that, I man, it's been an hour. Thank you guys for listening, of course, and make sure you follow, like, and subscribe on this YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at the Block Runner. We got a lot of stuff going on our Discord. We got Ethermon, we got Rovies, we got metas that are turning into NFTs like imminently now. And we're going to be focusing on the metaverse just because not only is that our business, but it's also something that's going to be equally as interesting as what's happening with Bitcoin. The idea of the metaverses are going to be competing with countries, like, that's something that if you're in now, I think you're going to be, patting yourself on the back in the future for doing that. So yeah.
yeah, I can't wait for the like, just like how when we were first introduced to Bitcoin, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, and our initial instinct was like, who the hell would spend money on this digital bullshit?
That's
Like,
right.
I can't wait till everyone's saying like, who the hell would spend time in this bullshit digital world? You know, like, once we start hearing those responses to like, oh,
Yeah, we
it's
know
like
we're
you
on
have
the
a
right path.
metaverse avatar, huh?
We know we're on the right path when we hear that.
Exactly. Yeah, like when people start insulting you for spending time, like, oh, you have an avatar, you have like wasting tens of thousands
Wearables.
of dollars
You
on your
spent
freaking,
$2,000 on that wearable? Like,
yeah,
why?
it's like, what a loser,
Yeah.
right? Like, as soon as you start hearing those, like that dialogue, that's when you know, like,
Yeah.
all right, it's coming.
Yeah.
Like, we're there, you know.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and please share if you liked what you saw, and we will catch you in the next video.
Peace.